All right, everybody, we are back. This is Creativity is the Cure. I am your host, Malcolm Moore, and today I have my good friend, David Wish. How are you doing today, David?
Great. Good to be with you, Malcolm.
I am talking to you today from my studio in Palmdale, California. Where are you? You're somewhere on the East Coast, right?
I am talking to you from the music room of my dreams here in Montclair, New Jersey.
How's the weather out there today? My brother lives in New Jersey.
It's pretty hot. It's pretty hot. It feels like it could be could be LA weather.
Yeah, I hear you guys are getting a lot of humidity and heat right now. True?
This is true.
All right, well, before we really get into it, let me tell the listeners a little bit about who you are. So first of all, as I know you, you're a musician, educator, entrepreneur, founder, and chief vision officer of Music Will. And if people don't know what Music Will is or what David does, I'm going to read a little bit from their website. Fueled by his belief that all people are innately musical, David Wish founded Music Will, a nonprofit organization that funds and runs one of the largest instrumental and vocal music programs in the U.S. public schools today. Music Will is also a leading provider of free instruments and curriculum. David has initiated and managed the launch of campaigns to restore, expand, and innovate music education for more than 1 million children in 44 states. That is amazing. Does that sound about accurate?
It sounds about accurate, and I've had, of course, a lot of help from a lot of amazing people, namely about 6,000 public school music teachers, one of whom it was you. That's how I got to meet you in the first place.
Oh, yeah. I actually wanted to bring up the bizarre way that we got to know each other. So we have to go back 5 years. I had just bought one of my favorite books called How Music Works by David Byrne. If you haven't read this, it's absolutely incredible. I think I've read it about 3 times. It's almost like a reference book. Have you read it?
I have, and I know the surprise that you had, and certainly the one that I had. I was like, wow.
All right, so on page 325, I was reading along one day, and it says, critics complained that teaching kids simple pop tunes was dumbing down their repertoire and would spell the death of classical music, which they'd never discover otherwise. The justification for this argument is that pop music is everywhere. Kids will hear it anyway, and alternatives that they might not otherwise encounter need to be introduced. However, this seems to be a fallacy. As one little kids rock teacher and classical guitar player in LA said, rock music turned me on to classical music, not the other way around. David Wish showed that most kids have a vast reservoir of creativity just waiting for permission to come out, waiting for a forum, a context, just like when someone opens up a music club within which their feelings and ideas may be expressed. It seems to me that here is where funding should go. Now, my friend Donick earlier that day had said, hey, I just got invited to this thing, Little Kids Rock. I can't go. Would you go in my place? And would you represent Muzak? Now, Muzak is a similar nonprofit that I work with, and we raise money to get instruments to kids who can't afford them. So I said, okay. And then I found out when I was living in LA back then, there was a new teacher workshop in Miramonte Elementary School. And so I went, and I was blown away that after I completed the training, they said to me, what do you need for your school? So at that point, I was in an elementary school. And I ended up getting 30 free ukuleles for my TK through 4 students. And it blew me away. And I was like, this is too good to be true. So anyway, I stayed in touch with Little Kids Rock that became Music Will later. And I just loved working with your company. Now, even more strange, I think it was last year, I was chosen among 20 teachers to go to the Allie Willis Wonderland Foundation, where we learned all about her career and what she was and what she did. And then we went and did a training at USC at the Ronald Tudor Campus Center. But I was sitting down, and something kept bringing my vision to this one guy sitting over there. And I finally said, wait a minute, are you David Wish? And he said, I sure am. And then ever since then, we've become fast friends, stayed in touch, and even more than that, which I want to get into later, you gave me a prototype of a little travel drum set you had invented that back then I think was called the Go Drum, and now it's called the Zip Kit.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty crazy, huh? How we kind of collided into each other like it was meant to be.
Well, it's funny. You get, if you're lucky in life, right?
Yeah.
You get old. You get to get old.
We're both lucky.
And but like, and if you're luckier still, you
Yeah.
learn a few things.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've learned is, what makes me happy. And one of the things that makes me happy more than just about anything is music. And one of the things that makes me even happier than just music
Yeah.
is sharing music and bringing music to and with other people.
Absolutely.
And the younger that they are, and the more bright-eyed and, in awe of this crazy planet that we live in,
Yeah.
it's just a spectacular feeling. But of course, I love teaching the child in any person. And so I guess the punchline to all of this is that I've tried to come up with my life mission. I founded a few nonprofits. I've been on a lot of different boards. They've all aimed at the same thing. And you know what I've come to the conclusion that is, my personal mission is to create and disseminate instruments of mass instruction.
Well, with the climate of the world today, I love that mission.
It's a good counter narrative, right?
Yeah.
So that we would meet through Music Will was, or that you would learn of the work. That was wonderful. And I'm very grateful to be able to supply teachers like yourself with the tools that they richly deserve, but sadly, frequently don't get. And so when people thank me for having facilitated a big gift of instruments, my immediate thing is, no, thank you. Thank you for doing a job that's so important, and for doing it even without the basic tools that you would need. I mean, that's school teachers for you. It's a profession. And of course, we could talk quite a bit about how it doesn't get the respect that it deserves. But I do think it's also equal parts a calling. You feel brought to this. It's a cause. It's a mission. It's like passing on to the next generation that which was passed on to you. And that's the other thing. I've never found anything quite as satisfying as the feeling of putting something of lasting value into another human being's life.
Yeah, and let me tell you, in the last 5 years, because you guys donated those 30 ukuleles, at least 1,000 kids have benefited in the last 5 years. So thank you again.
Well, and thank you again, because of course, ukuleles can't teach people to play ukuleles. Only people can do that. Sorry, I know that's a hackneyed phrase, and I don't even really fully believe it. But in any event, I would say that, and then meeting you through Willis Wonderland Foundation, I'm attracted to groups and organizations that are trying to ensure that that every child can express their inner music maker, and it really takes a village to do that. No one organization, no one school district or state department of education can fulfill what I think should be our national mandate to make sure that every single child gets every bit of music and arts education that they need and deserve. And so when I learned about the Willis Wonderland Foundation, I started kind of giving them some coaching, and they approached me about possibly joining their board. And it was shortly after that I got to meet you, and that was terrific. And I guess that's where I showed you my wackadoodle drum set.
Yes, which we'll get deeply into later. And before we change topics here, one thing that really drew me to you guys, let me go back a little bit. So I've been a private drum teacher for over 30 years, and I developed my own way originally because, when I grew up, I had great drum teachers, but often it would be rudiments and very serious and doing classical music. All these things were great, but I could never play the songs and the music that I liked. I mean, when I got a little bit older, I had a great teacher that I did get to do that with. However, I started saying, well, wait a minute, I don't want these kids to give up. So when I still teach today, when I have a new student, right away I go, what kind of music do you like? And so what I'll do is I'll figure out what level they're at. I'll start to teach them rudiments. I'll do a little bit of reading, but probably the first and most important thing is, do you like Imagine Dragons? Okay, let's learn how to play Believer. I want that student to go away from the first lesson feeling entitled, going, wow, I can play already. And of course, we'll get
Mhm.
back into the minutia of complex things that we need to learn as drummers later. But I was like, I don't know, this is kind of crazy what I'm doing. Is this okay? So then I hear about Elvis Costello's great book. I don't know if you heard of this, called How to Play Guitar and Why. And I go, and I listened, it's an audiobook, and I go, oh my God, he does the same thing. He says, let's grab these guys by giving them those 4 basic chords so they can play popular songs. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. And then when I learned about your modern band classes, I'm like, oh, this is a thing. The world is changing. We need to put these instruments in the kids' hands and get them playing right away. And your method almost reminds me of the Suzuki method of teaching violin, because I remember my little sister did that. And they teach by ear first, and they get you playing, Mississippi Hot Dog or something like that. But then they kind of reverse engineer and go back to notation and all that stuff. So I think you guys have been on to something for a long time, and I really feel like I fit into that method.
Well, I think that, how should I put it? I look at people, so you'll hear a lot of people say, oh, everybody's musical. Mm-hmm. Everyone's an artist, etc. But I've only found a very few people in my life, maybe not very few, but fewer than I would like, who really live their teaching that way, right? It's like, oh, well, everyone's musical, but oh, wait, if you're not learning the way that I'm showing you how to learn, then, eventually maybe I'll get frustrated or you will. And I've always been of the mind, like, and I didn't make this up, some smart teacher did, that if, kids aren't learning the way we teach, we should maybe consider teaching the way they learn.
Completely agreed.
Yeah, and there's so many learning styles. So that to get pedantic about your pedagogy or your approach is almost immediately a problem, because, at least from my vantage point, because it's sort of like, oh, so you have found the one where I have found the one size fits all approach to music. Like, I wonder how the world, could carry on before I got here. Like how did they make all that music without me? And, but I really think that being musical is basically hardwired into humans.
Yeah.
It's part of what makes us human. And there are as many different ways of being musical as there are of actually just being human.
Yeah.
But it's so natural for people to make music. I think a lot of societal gobbledygook has to get piled onto people before they're separated from what is such a natural thing for them. In lots of cultures in the world, I'll say that again because I got a text. In lots of cultures in the world, there's this saying, I think it's from Zimbabwe, like, if you can talk, you can sing. If you can walk, you can dance. It's, and it's just this, that's really my belief. And I guess when you talked about Suzuki, so it's funny, when I first started doing, this teaching of music,
right,
which I never would have thought I would do, because I quit every music program in every public school that I ever attended. Because I was dyslexic, I was probably dyslexic. I couldn't make I couldn't make heads or tail of the notes. And it just didn't come naturally. And I loved music, but I just assumed, and I feel like I got this message from my teachers, I just really didn't have what it took to make music, because I couldn't focus the way they wanted me to. So anyways, I learned to play music outside of school,
right,
with friends, and and then it just became so natural. But I guess the primary point that I would make is that music is like one of these things that has defined, it's been like the emotional first responder of humanity ever, since time immemorial. And music doesn't come from music schools or from music classes.
Right.
Music comes from people everywhere, in every culture all over the world. So when I first started teaching, back to Suzuki, people would say to me, hey, you're just like that Suzuki guy. And I was like, you mean the motorcycle? And no. There's this guy from Japan named Shinichi Suzuki. Or they would say, oh, you're like Carl Orff.
Yep.
And I would say, like, the Carmina Burana guy. Yeah, that's the guy. But he also taught music. So, like, I was blissfully unaware of any of those pedagogies. I'd never been exposed to them. But when I started to really look under the hood, I could see this language analogy playing out. So, for example, Suzuki has that mother tongue thing.
Yeah.
And this, like, music being as natural as speaking and blah, blah, blah. But the thing that I find fascinating about the Suzuki approach, and of course, again, I don't knock any approach,
right?
Because if it works for people, great.
Exactly.
That's the purpose.
Yeah.
But I will say that the language analogy that they use is a little incomplete, because you're sort of like playing by ear, you're playing using your listening skills, but you never speak your music. In other words, it's all about reciting.
Yes.
And it's not about the creation of music. And that doesn't map as well with, like, what I would call more of a language model. And so my big punchline to this whole soliloquy is like, what's the main purpose of music? Communication. What's the main purpose of speech? Communication. Now, I can communicate to you in a play where I'm reading someone else's words, and I can really motivate and inspire and move you. And that's fine, and that's good and well.
Right.
Or I could do that through a conversation. I like the idea of giving kids the agency to do either or. You want to recite music and move people? Great.
Yeah.
You want to create your own music and move people? That's also great.
Yeah.
And traditional music education sometimes really heavily favors the former. Like, yes, we're going to learn how to read, we're going to learn how to play this piece and that piece. But that's more of a math approach. Yes. Nothing wrong with it, but it has its limitations, as opposed to sort of the language approach, which of course has its own limitations. And my preference is I lean much more that way as a jazz guy and rock guy and whatever. But I think that you can't know what your path is if you're not kind of given an exposure to both a math approach, but also a language approach to music. And I think it's very natural.
Yeah, and I think your approach and the way I do takes out a lot, at least at the beginning, a lot of the fear and intimidation of learning notation right away. I think if you can gain their trust and empower them to be able to play songs they like, then you have a better chance at getting them to the more complexities of higher level interpretation of music. And you're also reminding me, I don't know if I ever told you, I grew up in Rochester, New York, and I was really lucky to see a lot of people there all the time, like Chuck Mangione and Steve Gadd and Tony Levin. So they also have this great music college there called the Eastman School of Music.
Oh, yeah.
I got to go to a lot of recitals when I was very young in the 80s. I got to do a whole workshop with Ravi Shankar. One of the most illuminating ones, though, because I was kind of like you. I was pretty intimidated by complex music and having it written out and everything. So I got to go see David Byrne do a special appearance at the Eastman School of Music, and I'll never forget this. He comes out, plays a few songs, and then he plays this newer song that was very different than his other stuff. And after he was done, a professor there goes, very fascinating chord changes. I wanted to ask you at the chorus, what is the last chord that you're playing? And he goes, I don't know what the fuck it is. It's this chord. And he just plays it. And that really dawned on me going, wow, here's a guy I admire. There's a huge body of work, very impressive performer and musician. And he just developed his own way. Like a lot of the other punk bands, they just bought instruments and they developed their own style. I mean, I often tell people, look at Bill Berry from REM. He doesn't really hold his sticks the right way. His drum set is set up weird, but you know what? He is the best drummer for REM. So I always I have a lot of students too that have dyslexia, or kids that are playing left-handed, but they only have a right-handed kit, or, like an electronic one. And I'm like, look, be yourself. I'm going to teach you, different ways to hold your sticks and play your bass drum pedals, but whatever is comfortable for you works for me.
Yeah, well, again, it comes back down to that. People are like, if I ask a parent of a newborn baby, a luminous little baby.
Right.
Do you think your luminous one is going to grow up and talk? I mean, I think they'd be offended. I mean, of course, maybe they're worried. There might be some special, situations, but it's
Right.
kind of like, of course they're going to talk. What are you talking about? Okay, are they going to, how about this? Will they learn to read? Probably the same, right? Certainly in a community where people have
Yeah.
access to, will they play music? Oh, well, I hope so. I mean, and it'll start to trail off. But to me, when I look at children and the way they develop, they're so naturally musical.
Right.
And what's so funny is like when people say, they bring up people like, well, David Byrne doesn't know how to read, or Paul McCartney doesn't learn how to read. Like I've thought,
Or Buddy
long and
Rich.
hard
Most
about-
people didn't know that. Buddy Rich couldn't read either.
Exactly. What I think, so I've thought longer and harder on this issue. I'm going to go out on a limb and say than the average bear. And here's the conclusion that I have come to. The vast majority of people who've made music, living and dead, never learned to read a note of music in their lifetimes.
Right.
Now, I base that on this fact. 1 out of every 10 person who's ever been alive is alive today. Written music in the West really didn't become a thing until about 700 or 800 years ago. So basically everybody before that, there was no real written music, certainly not in broad, usage. So you've already got the vast majority of humanity. And even up into the modern era, if you look at like Indian classical music or Chinese classical music, these are styles that go, deep music that goes back in some cases thousands of years, and for many, 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 many years until this last century, none of it was written down because it wasn't necessary, right? And humans only developed writing, just regular writing, outside maximum 4,000 or 5,000 years ago in Sumeria. So it wasn't like people weren't talking.
Right.
So the point is when people who are exceptionally gifted musically don't read a note of music, it doesn't surprise me. It's actually more the norm.
Yeah.
Which is now, this isn't to say that learning to read will keep you from being terrific. It could make you terrificer still, but it's not a precondition. And here's a true story that a lot of people I like to tell, but I don't get to as often now that it's so far from the time when I started music. But I got the idea that I should do this when I was working as a first grade school teacher. So again, I was never a music teacher. I played music on the side as a passion thing in bands and stuff. And I would bring my guitar to school and the kids loved that. But I wasn't like a music teacher. I was a first grade teacher who would sing songs to my kids sometimes, etc.
Right.
Well, one day I'm watching a documentary film about one of my musical heroes, a guitarist named Django Reinhardt.
Oh, we named our older son after him.
Oh, that's great. I tried to name our dog after him, but I was outvoted by our family. So I had to name her Jazz, which is more cryptic, but whatever. But so I'm sitting there watching this video. And for your listeners who don't know who Django Reinhardt was, he's considered really one of the handful of like guitarists in the modern era that just impacted the instrument, where if you trace, so many great players will refer back, if not directly to Django, the person they refer to, all roads lead back to people like Django and Charlie Christian and Andre Segovia or Chet Atkins. So he's one of the towering figures. But what's so wonderful about him is that sad it wasn't so wonderful for him, but he was an illiterate French Roma person who never went to school, was an amazing violin player who was in a terrible caravan fire.
You're right.
And had 2 of his fingers largely paralyzed, and his hand was his fretting hand horribly disfigured. Now, what did he then go on to do? He created an entirely new style of playing guitar, highly virtuosic, all based on his quote unquote deficiencies,
Right.
his limitations, his handicaps. Now, I'm watching this video about Django, and I'm not thinking at all about, the kids I'm teaching each day. I'm just so excited to be learning about one of my favorite guitar players. And then they show this scene of a bunch of Roma kids playing the most ferocious Django Reinhardt style jazz my jaw hit the floor. It didn't even occur to me that young children could play that way. And so then they interviewed Django Reinhardt's son Babik, and they said, how old do you think kids should be when they start to play? And Babik goes, well, you want them to have enough hand strength, whatever, but I think 5 is a good age. And I'm like, 5? Well, I'm teaching 6-year-olds right now. I'm a first grade school teacher. So at that point I begged and borrowed a bunch of, guitars from my musician friends who owed me money or favors, or usually both in some combination. And I started a guitar class for my 32 first grade students.
Wow.
And the real kernel, if we were going to look at the real seed of what started Music Will / Little Kids Rock, was I was like, okay, so I got all the guitars and stuff. And I hadn't thought about music education other than myself teaching myself and playing with my friends and all that since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And so I was like, but I was now a school teacher. So like, what would any self-respecting school teacher do if they're about to teach a new subject, which I was? Oh, I teach kids to play guitar. I better go get some curriculum.
Right.
Well, boy, was that a bucket of cold water. I go to the music store and it's like, Mel Bay, Volume 1, Merrily We Roll Along. Carl Fisher, learn to play the guitar, go tell Aunt Rhody. Tell her what? Like, my kids are listening to Selena and the Backstreet Boys.
Yeah.
So I realized I had to find a different path forward. So on my first day in my first class with all of those kids and me wondering, will I be able to tune 32 guitars? Well, how's this going to go? Anyways,
I've been there.
I just, yeah, exactly. Well, you learn quickly.
Yeah.
And you learn to tune quickly too.
Yep.
But I asked them the same question you say that you ask your private drum students, straight up. What do you like? What do you want to play? Who, and so I heard, Selena, Carlos Santana, the Backstreet, whatever. I'm like, okay. So and a lot of times, by the way, because I was pretty into jazz by then, I didn't know some of these. I didn't know Selena. I didn't know the Backstreet Boys. I wasn't listening to that music. And this was long enough ago that you had to go to a store to buy things called CDs or records or tapes to hear this music. So it's like, oh, Bitty Bitty Bum Bum by this woman named Selena.
Yeah.
Let's see, it's in B flat. Oh, that's hard key. Well, let's just do it in A. All right, fine, we'll do it in A. And so I started teaching the kids the way that I learned, which was very, very different, worlds apart from the way that I was taught in school. So it was, okay, we're going to play Bitty Bitty Bum. Okay, look, here's 3 pictures on the board. See the way these dots look like they're in a row? Yeah, we're going to call that A. Push down on those dots. Good. See, this one looks like a triangle. Yeah, that's called B. And this other one, I think of it as like a car seat. See, you look at it, that's E. It's like a line. All right, good. Let's play that song. And, if kids had trouble switching chords, it was like, okay, you just played that chord when I point to you, right? Blah, blah, blah. And very quickly, we weren't it didn't feel like we were learning music. Though we were, it felt like we were making music, and I wanted to make that distance between the child's desire and its accomplishment as short as possible.
Right.
There's that saying, life is uncertain, so eat your dessert first.
Yeah. Guilty.
I can think of, totally. And I can think of that's, to me, that's a secret. That's one secret sauce for education.
Yeah.
Is let kids be intrinsically motivated. Let them follow their bliss. Then the learning is that's like pushing something downhill.
Yeah.
Tell them that that they need to know something and they're not showing much interest. And then tell them you'll give them a good grade or a gold star or whatever. Now you're getting into that extrinsic motivation, and it's just not the same, It just isn't the same. And so if you take that more language-based approach, that fun community, what do people use language for? To talk about the things they want to talk about, right? So why wouldn't music be the same way? Like, what music should we play? How about the music that we already know and that we like? Okay, that sounds great.
What's funny is one of my last classes before school ended this year, all the kids said that they love that song Luther by Kendrick Lamar and I think SZA. And so number one, I got to teach them about Luther Vandross because that song samples Luther. But number two, I was like, let's learn it on ukulele. It blew their minds. And I was like, this is crazy because they already knew all the words. And it wasn't that hard to play. And I actually use this great YouTube channel called Musication. And what they do is they transpose almost all the popular songs to C major so the kids can play them. And boy, just to see them walk out of the class knowing that they learned how to play that, it was awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm older. I'm 57. But I'm not so old that I forget what it felt like.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember it like the lightning bolt strike that it was. I'm sitting there in high school realizing I'm never going to play an instrument. I don't have what it takes.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. My friend Paul Brill, he plays guitar, and we came up together. And he and I are at least equally dorky. So if he can do it, then maybe he could show me how to do it. So I asked him one day, I'm like, hey, Paul, would you show me how to play like a song? And he showed me, here, put your fingers there. Okay, yeah. Okay, I got them here. Yeah. Okay, now put them there. Okay, yeah. Now do this. Okay. All right, now we're playing this Bob Marley song.
Yeah.
Or now we're playing, this Neil Young song.
Three Little Birds. Super easy.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was just like, what? Yeah. That's it? And boy, was I motivated at that point. So and it took Paul all of 5 minutes, and I was hooked.
Yeah.
Hooked. And I also remember I'd been playing for maybe just only 3 months. I learned the summer of my senior year, thereabouts. And I'll never forget the first time I got together with a drummer.
Yeah.
And it was like, I feel like I'd been eating jelly sandwiches for 2 months. They were good. Yeah. But it was like suddenly like, wait, there's peanut butter? Oh my God, this is incredible. And then I remember the first time I had this, was distortion, and it was like, what? I can have a glass of milk too? This is nuts, and that's just never stopped. It's never stopped, and it's like that. There's that saying, I think it's Rachmaninoff said that music is enough for a lifetime, but a lifetime is not enough for music.
Wow. Yeah, and you're also reminding me of one of my specialties is teaching special needs students. And when we do ukulele, at first it really put a lot of those kids off as too complicated. But I was like, wait a minute. And I went over to one of the kids and I was like, okay, C major, you only need one finger on a ukulele, A minor. And just to see those kids at least hit the 2 chords when we're playing together and the smile on their face was worth everything.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, it's no wonder that we hit it off. I mean, I have, I love humanity and I love humans, but like certain groups of humans are especially dear to me. Teachers being one, but special needs teachers are, of course, their own special thing because you have to have a level of faith.
Right.
People talk about patience. It's like, well, yeah, okay, fine. But like patience, sure, it is a virtue. But stronger than patience is the belief. You believe in these kids, and you believe you don't know everything there is to know about them. And that's part of it. And by the way, I always, to me, it's all like everyone's somewhere on the continuum of like special needs. Like I got special needs,
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, I have ADHD. I was dyslexic as a child. Yeah. If you looked at my report cards, it's a little bit of a disaster. But like, these very narrow definitions of
Right.
how a person's going to grow up and be successful, or how a person's going to grow up and be musical. They don't really help anybody. So I just that doesn't surprise me in the least. And the other thing is, I think that the teachers that inspire me the most either say or believe this sort of consciously, or they embody it, they live it. I certainly aspire to. And actually, for me, I can't help it. When I teach, I learn. And when I learn, I teach.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like
Goes both ways.
Yeah, it's like there's this false dichotomy that we have the music and we need to give it to the kids. I always say, like, all people are musical, so we just need to draw the music out. We don't have to drum anything in.
Right. I would like to go way, way back in time to when David Wish was a child. And I'd like to know, what was your first creative memory?
Oh, I don't have to think very hard. It was drawing. And
Really?
And like, oh, absolutely. And like so many kids, you bring your little scribble scrabble over to your parents, and what do they say? Wow, that's one of the best one of those that I've ever seen. I'm putting that on the refrigerator where everybody can see it.
Yeah.
And I believed them.
Mm-hmm.
I actually believed my parents when they told me that my art was good. And so, like, I remember I developed this, I don't know where I got the idea, but I would draw these, like, whatever, a horse or a person,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't be especially sophisticated, but it would be open inside, and I would fill it with geographic designs. I still have a few.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I remember, like, just feeling so proud and so validated. Now, I can actually juxtapose that against my earliest musical attempting memories.
Okay.
And they are very different. So I remember being told that I could not sing well by teachers.
Yeah.
I remember being told by my fourth grade violin teacher to not actually play during the concert.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but so I believed the message. Like, I believed, oh, I'm not musical. And it's funny, even though all these years later, I'm 57, like, I do this visualization thing with people a lot of times where I say, I want you to think of a time where somebody denigrated your creativity.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't write, or, maybe you should, maybe, art's not for you. You should, whatever it was, think about it. And how long ago was it? And in an average room of teachers, and I think anybody, those memories that they carry are generally from childhood. Not always, but the majority. Oh, I was 7, I was 12, I was 10.
Right.
And then I flipped the script. I'm like, okay. And by the way, I love this question because you're the first person who's ever asked me that. I never really thought about it till you brought it up, and boom, it came right in my head. Drawing,
cool.
Absolutely, and the validation I got from it. But if you flip the script and you say, now think of a time that someone elevated your career. Oh, I didn't know that you were a poet. Or, hey, you're really good at cooking. Or, wow, I didn't realize you're a wonderful artist. Or, gosh, I didn't know you play guitar. And, like, you know how that made you feel?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You can be this unwitting gatekeeper as a teacher with a kid. You can turn their creativity off like a light switch. If you sit there in judgment of it, if you have some destination or some preconceived notion that child has a deficit, but thankfully for them, you're going to fill it. No. They'll pick up on that, I think.
Yeah.
And so, it's a beautiful question. And I think for me, it reminds me so much of why I drew. Is I just got positive feedback from it, and I liked doing it. What more could a person ask for? But it was solitary. right? You tend to draw by yourself.
Right.
And you know what's funny, Malcolm, to be really honest? I drew all the way up to and maybe even for a year or two after I started playing guitar. But
Yeah.
then what happened was, I don't know, like, yeah, I had I have creative impulses, and there was just something for me more satisfying about making music. It was instant, it was fast. If I was doing it alone,
Right, but
you
that
know,
encouragement brought you to that place. You probably wouldn't have had the courage to get into music if your parents hadn't said that about your drawings, right?
well, absolutely. And I also could have slipped through the cracks musically. I mean, I just feel very, very fortunate to have a friend as dear as Paul Brill was, and to have him show me the light. Now, maybe it would have happened for me, but just as easily it might not have. And I know no shortage of people, and I'm sure you do as well, who, when you say, "Hey, do you play music?" Well, when I was a kid, I took lessons for this many years or whatever, and I didn't have any talent, or I didn't stick with it, or da da. And then the punchline's always the same. And now I wish that I could play.
Yep.
And so I never lose sight of how grateful I am that I did ultimately manage to get on the musical choo-choo train, because I could have just as easily been off that wagon forever. And although, yes, the drawing thing did help, but it was that same approbation that I got from my peer group
Yeah.
afterwards. I'm in college, we're hanging out in someone's room and I'm playing a song and we're singing, or, I'm in a band at a coffee house or whatever. And it just became this wonderful thing. I mean, it did what music does. It helped build my community. It strengthened my personal relationships. And if somebody broke my heart, it consoled me.
Yeah.
If I wanted to impress someone and tell them how much I love them, well, boom, then I got that in my pocket. I can use the music thing for that. It just, and the last thing in the world that I was thinking of it was as an academic subject.
Yeah.
It was just like, no, this is like the fabric. This is just part of the fabric of my life.
Well, when you were growing up, were your parents creative?
Well, absolutely, and both of them. I would say I'll start with my dad, because his was a little more limited. He had a wonderful singing voice, and he played some basic guitar, but he was also very self-conscious. He still is. So he wouldn't do it that often, but I was aware that he could. And also, he was a wonderful he was a great illustrator, and but if you hear him tell, he would always be like, no, you're the real artist, because you just make things up and I can just copy. And it was true in that he would copy drawings that other people had done, but he did it with like real skill. But anyways, he must have never found it satisfying enough, or never found it, enough confidence to really throw himself into any of those things. But he certainly obviously had and has ability.
Yeah.
My mother was on the other end of the spectrum. She's kind of a polymath, and she did pottery, and she did painting and silk screening and wood turning and carving and stained glass and decoy building. And she built houses, and her creativity actually tipped over from being a hobby and an avocation to a profession. So she she would build houses,
Wow.
and that started like just, yeah, I know. I mean, she was a very interesting person, my mom. And there's zero question in my mind that I got this sort of sense of that creating things is cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Creating things is fulfilling. It's fun, from my mother. And I also got the sense that you follow that bliss of creating things, and you can't know where it will lead you, but you can certainly know that the journey will be meaningful and beautiful.
Yeah.
Maybe frustrating, who knows, but you're certainly not going to, it's like that time that you spend creating things, it's really deeply fulfilling. And I don't think it's unique to the arts. You create a business, you can create a family, but building things is always more meaningful than and fulfilling than destroying them. That's for sure. And I definitely got that from my mother. There's no question. And she from hers, so you can't see me because we're here in we're on the phone, but I'm looking at a painting that my grandmother did that's on the wall of my office next to a wood carving that my grandfather did. Those were my mother's parents. And I'm looking at this beautiful wooden bowl that my mother turned that's got silver leafing on it and everything.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's something really wonderful. And I'm looking at and my son's in art school right now, I should say. So I'm looking at two beautiful pictures, actually 4 wonderful pieces that I have up in my office. So yes, I've been very fortunate to come from a family with a lot of willingness to elevate people's creativity within. And even so, I do remember as a kid, my father letting me know that he didn't think I could sing. And this was the same guy who told me that my drawings were great. And because I really didn't know music, I actually thought, well, wait a minute. I wouldn't have known to say this. I can't get my voice to match pitch.
Yeah.
That means I'm not musical. I wouldn't have said it that way, but I certainly believed it. I'm like, oh, other people just open up their mouths and beautiful music comes out. I can't do that, so I'm not musical.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, that's the beginning and the end of their musical career. They buy a line that someone told them and it's not true. So one of the things I've been able to maintain, even into my adult life, is a healthy fear of public singing. And I've thought about maybe I should really work on it. But as a professional tool, I've sort of elected not to. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. Why? Because I like to sing in public and make myself vulnerable and show people that I'm not a very natural singer at all, because sometimes people will be intimidated by the music that I can make. And they think, oh, well, Dave is so, he's a really good this or that, or he can really play guitar, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay, fine. But there's plenty I can't do. And let me show you that I can relate to you. If you feel embarrassed, if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel like people might be judging you, oh, I still know what that feels like. And I still won't let it stop me, because it's not, it's not good for me and it's not good for society.
If we had to sound like Stevie Wonder to be a professional singer, that wouldn't have allowed all these great musical artists like Bob Dylan, Lou Reed, Henry Rollins. Everybody can have their own style, and I think that's really beautiful that you make yourself vulnerable, because I think that'll help inspire even more kids.
Well, I think that it is the number one thing that keeps people of all ages from exploring their creativity is this fear of being judged, fear of not being good or not good enough. And that's a societal thing, meaning it's not that approach is not evenly distributed around the world.
Yeah.
But in a country like ours, where you've got America's Got Talent or whatever, you have the Grammys and everything's this competition and monetized. Right. There's a self-censoring that can come from that I don't think is healthy for the creative side of the average person.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, there's a lot of people that sing in unique ways, or they rap, or they talk, and we shouldn't stop kids just because they're different.
Oh, yeah. In fact, we should encourage them, because that's where the fun stuff comes from. If I come out there and I sound just like Bon Jovi, what good does that do? There's already Bon Jovi. Exactly. Okay. Well, then I'm going to sound just like Eddie Van Halen. Well, that's fine, but there's already Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so okay, maybe I just try to sound like me, Dave.
Do you think creativity could be implemented in curing people, or at least helping people with mental health struggles such as depression or anxiety?
Well, of course, I'm not an expert on this, and I know that there's an entire field of music therapy and art therapy. And so for me, the circumstantial evidence of the existence of those fields
Yeah.
screams out, of course,
Yeah.
otherwise it wouldn't be being taught and et cetera. But, anecdotally, I have certainly seen
Yeah.
people, students, I like to say I've seen art, music in my case, help, tough kids soften up, or shy kids step up,
Yeah.
or anxious kids loosen up,
Yeah.
and find that pathway to feeling better about who they are as a human being. And it's not just because they can do a skill, it's because that skill enmeshes them in a community. It's because that skill connects likely to something that for them is just really meaningful. And at the end of the day, boy, I can't think of a better reason to make music, So I absolutely think so. I wouldn't consider myself an expert on it.
Yeah.
But again, I'm familiar with there's a wonderful organization called Guitars for Vets, and there's another one like that. I forget its name.
How about Music Cares has done a lot to help people with mental health struggles too.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. So I think that, but I mean, yes. So yeah, and they've done stuff like after Katrina and other catastrophes, helping with trauma, helping with recovery, but also like, you think about our veterans, they're subjected often to things that we would scarcely wish on our perceived worst enemies. And yet there are these programs and they come back with real trauma. And there are organizations out there that are demonstrating real transformative healing and change for people like that. And in fact, I recently got involved with Rick Allen. He's the drummer from Def Leppard.
Right. Yeah.
So your listeners may remember he lost his arm in a car crash very early in the Def Leppard ascent to superstardom.
Right.
And in a testament to that band's commitment to one another and to Rick's perseverance, he remained their drummer throughout, and they never replaced him, and he relearned how to play and all this other stuff.
You would never, if you listen to their music, you would have no idea. And I remember reading Modern Drummer how they made that little shark pedal for his left foot so he could play snare drum. I just thought that was so cool.
Yeah, he has started the Raven Drum Foundation with his partner Lauren, and
I didn't know
they use. Yeah, no, it's wonderful. It's out there. I should introduce you guys. I mean, you're such a drum, maven and teacher and all around good guy. You would love them. They do drumming with first responders and with veterans.
Oh, cool.
To use drumming to address trauma, which Rick knows quite a lot about, given, what happened to him when he was a young man. I mean, losing your arm in a car accident, it's one thing when it's 30 years in the rear mirror and it wasn't you.
Yeah.
But, when you really stop and think about that, it must have just been absolutely gutting, horrible.
Devastating.
Yeah, and so he knows exactly what it feels like. I mean, no one can really understand exactly what it feels like, but he, like whatever, when he meets a person who's lost a leg to a landmine or, whatever to shrapnel, like he has some insights, some personal. So again, yeah, of course. And back to that, my little saying about music, that it is like this emotional first responder when you're in real need of healing. And it's little wonder that virtually every culture in the world develops it. It's culture. In a way, it's almost like it's medicinal in its own way.
I don't know if you know my friend Christine Stevens, but when I moved to California 12 years ago, she was my mentor in learning about wellness drum circles, and so we learned a lot. And I started playing cajon when I moved here. And one of my favorite things to do, especially with kids who are shy or have mental challenges or special needs kids, is I get them playing either a drum set or cajon. And so first what I do is, okay, let's use your hands. Okay, let's use your legs. And then I go sing along with me. And especially kids with things like Tourette syndrome that have tics. And if people don't know what that is out there, that's involuntary either verbal or physical things that happen sporadically.
Mhm.
Boy, you know what? Guess what? When they start singing and drumming, after about 5 minutes, I go, you know what? You didn't do any of your ticks. And they go, what? And it's so cool to see the creativity, give them a little bit of a break of something
Yeah.
that causes them so much stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, just just even the terminology, the drum circle, a circle of what? A circle of people doing what?
Yeah.
Making music together. Wow. There's a wonderful guy. I think his name is Joey Weisenberg, but he does singing for different like religious groups.
Yeah.
I think, churches, synagogues, mosques. And the first thing he said to me, I remember, so I hired him once to kind of do a presentation to our staff and give us, because I'd heard that this guy was like magic. And I wanted to treat our staff to something powerful and musical because, of course, we dedicate all our time to trying to bring music to other people, but so why not to ourselves?
Right.
And he said something that I thought was so interesting right away. He's like, okay, so we're going to sing. And the first thing we need to do is form a circle, because when you form a line, it's just like there's like, okay, so you're in a line, like what? There's no audience here. It's just us. We're making music together.
Yeah.
And you can't see each other.
It's like the
Rockettes.
Rockettes. It's not going to work with singing.
Right. And, of course, yeah, you can do it. But again, it's just breaking down like, wait, why are we going to sing? Because we're going to have a performance. Well, wait a minute. Is that why people sing? No, they sing because singing feels good and it sounds good and it makes you happy or it makes you feel better. And so just even the simplest thing, like don't practice singing in lines, sing together in circles.
Yeah.
And the other thing that he did, which I thought was wonderful, is he talked about, don't sing words and don't do exercises.
Yeah.
Sing little, na, na,
Phonetic.
na, 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 na. Right. Because if you're worrying about the words, you're already one step away from the music. Like, wait a minute, is this the chorus? Or wait, when does the verse go? It's like, that's all fun.
And you break the language barrier. So you can invite people, English learner kids. Everybody can just do phonetic singing.
Amen. 100%. Yeah. And that's really, I just love, I've experienced it myself as a, younger aspiring musician. I loved being in the company of great music makers who didn't judge me and were happy. They were fine. Like, yeah, I knew they could play Doors around me, but they didn't care. And you could always see it. You could see it that they're like, this is what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, hey kid, yeah, you're doing the right thing. And, I'm doing unto you as was done unto me. Someone else let me sit in, and it was great and it was good. And I love a great big rollicking band where you've got people playing at all different levels.
Yeah.
It's so meaningful and fun. And by the way, you don't really have much of a choice if you're a public school teacher. I always like to joke when I'm doing teacher training, like, so all your kids, by the time they come to you, right, the schools and the districts and our ed system has made it so that they're all basically at the same level, right? And, like give or take a degree.
Yeah.
And that always either gets stone silence or a total, everyone starts falling out laughing because they get the joke right away. But it's like, okay, well, and that's an analogy for humans, right? Like they come in every shape and size.
Yeah.
You can outlaw diversity. You can't stop it, or you can try to outlaw it. Hopefully you won't be successful. Sorry, I digress. But I feel that it's one of the things that's so beautiful is the people that you may least expect to contribute that magic spice, that magic ingredient, that turn of phrase, that certain something. You never know who it's going to be. And that's, of course, the beauty of a jam session, which to me, again, using that language analogy, it's just like a great conversation. You don't know necessarily where it's going to go.
My wife and I, one of our favorite bands is called Dead Can Dance. And one thing I love about these guys is not only do they use ancient musics from different cultures, but most of their songs are just phonetic. So they're popular all over the world because they're playing music and just singing notes. And that just really reaches everybody.
Yeah, that's cool.
A lot of people have heard of Little Kids Rock, but recently you've changed the name to Music Will. Why did you do that? I remember you told me and there was a really good reason.
Sure. Well, the simple answer is something that I would never have thought of myself, but branding,
Yeah.
meaning that people ascribe certain, you give certain emotional weight to a brand name. If I say Exxon or I say Tom Shoes, you probably have two very different images or reactions to these brands,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so Little Kids Rock, it says a lot. It carries a certain something. And over the years, what I learned it said is this is a program for little people, for young children, maybe kindergarten, maybe preschool, maybe kindergarten, maybe elementary school, but that's
Yeah.
what it's for.
Yeah.
And it teaches them to play rock and roll. Now, all of those things are true, but that does not capture the totality of what we do. And so you were a middle school teacher, right? Or high school?
First I was elementary and then I was middle school.
Right. So after the umpteenth hundred time of, talking to a new school district that we would be working with and saying, no, it's not just for elementary. No, it's not only rock.
Yeah.
We were like, okay, it's gotta be something else.
Something that encapsulates everything, right?
Exactly. So we had a contest with our teachers to come up with a new name.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and this is the true story of how it went down. So we had a big conference, not to rename it. We have our Modern Band Summit every year. Had a big conference. All these people came out. The teachers were there. We told them we wanted the new name, and everyone gave all these suggestions. And as I'm flying home, I'm looking at them, and none of them landed. Just none of them felt right. Or even, and this was a while ago, so even if some of them did, I'm sure we couldn't get them, right? Like, so for example, if I wanted to say, oh, I've got a great name, Save the Music. Oh, well, that's already taken. Oh, okay. Well, so there's other names that we could have had, but this one teacher, Warren Graham, he didn't put any suggestions in, but when on his way home, he started thinking about all the things that music will do for people. So he started writing them down on a piece of paper, like music will make you happy. Music will heal a broken heart. Music will, allow you to see the world like nothing else. Music will bring people together. And then when he looked at it, he noticed on the piece of paper that, there is music will.
Over and over.
Over and over in a line. And he suggested that name. And I liked it, music will, and then anyone can fill it in. Like Malcolm, what's your answer? Music will what?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
You get to say what music will do. And there's a little bit of a double entendre, like a will for music. Yeah. Some people have said, well, what about a will of something that's dead? I'm like, well, yeah, I guess you could do that too, but I don't think of it that way.
But music actually with that context, it's what are you leaving for future generations? So we could put a positive spin on that.
Oh, I like that. See, there you go, man. No, that's fantastic. Yeah, in my will, I'm passing this on to the next generation.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
And you said there was a second meaning for you as well?
Oh, well, like Little Kids Rock had a double entendre, right? Yeah. It's like Little Kids rock because they're awesome, but also they rock because they want to play rock, but they also want to play. So I like that double entendre. Yeah. And to me, music will is its own sort of double entendre, like not as on the nose, perhaps. But just that like music, like it's an answer and it's a question.
Yeah.
What will
I see.
Blah, blah, blah. Music will. You can make of it what you will, which is how I think music should be taught and experienced, in the best sense of the word.
Because I'm a drummer, I'm very excited to talk about this. Tell me all about the Zip Kit. What is it and how did you come up with that crazy idea?
So for many years, I would go into musical classrooms around the country and I would see large groups of students, music will students playing guitar, or like you said, ukulele or bass or keys or dancing or singing, and almost always one drum set and then a line of kids wishing that it was their turn to play on the drums. And so I was like, well, there's a lot of understandable reasons why these kids have to wait their turn.
Yeah.
Let's stack them up. Well, let's see. Drums are really big. Okay, so I can't put 20 in a classroom. All right, that's reason number one. And even if the classroom was big enough, 20 full-size drum sets is going to make quite a noise and perhaps disturb the peace and the neighbors and get you run out of your school as a music teacher.
And the English teacher next door, yeah.
Yeah, they might not appreciate that. Knock it off. So I started looking into there's gotta be something. What if there was just a quieter drum set, and what would people typically do? They would have drum pads, or they'd have bongos or congas. And my feeling about that is giving a kid who wants to play the drum set a drum pad or a bongo is sort of like telling a kid that wants to go swimming that you have a bathtub for them. It's like, no. I get it, but no, that's not what I want. Now, nothing against bongos. Yeah, bongos are fine, and so are drum pads, but not if your heart is desiring a drum set, less so. So I had a vision. I was like, man, why should I be able to teach 20 kids to play guitar and not 20 drummers? And so began my quest to build what I first started calling a facsimile drum set. It doesn't have to look like one. It just has to sound like one a little bit, at least. So it's design-based, constraint-based design. And my constraints were, if I'm closing my eyes, I move my body as if this was a drum set. Nothing is different. No leaning over to hit the snare, or leaning back to hit the kick, or right foot doing. It's just got to work that way. And so I came up with this thing, which I originally called the Go Drum, but now we call it the Zip Kit. And I got a patent for a bunch of different ideas that I'd come up with.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy to say that after many, many years of research and development and work, the Zip Kit is being produced by our partners at Nuvo, which is a musical instrument company that makes a lot of musical instruments out of plastics, which the Zip Kit is made of plastic.
Yeah.
And it is 11 by 11 by 20 something inch size box that fits on your back like a backpack.
Yeah.
And it allows you to carry literally a 5-piece drum set with you everywhere you go, including the throne, including the sticks. And you have one of the last prototypes that I ever built. That's a basement version, meaning built literally in a basement or a workshop.
Still pretty cool,
but the one, it is, yeah. I mean, I have fallen in love with it. Now I know that's a little vain since I am the daddy of it, but hey, we fall in love with our kids because they're so lovable. And the Zip Kit is one of, I could joke and say it's my fourth and least loved, but still deeply loved child. I've got two real world ones. They're tied for one. Number two is probably Music Will as a distance, as a near second, but still distant, and then Zip Kit after that. But this all gets back to that sort of theme of my life. I want to build instruments of mass instruction, and the Zip Kit is that. And the delight I have felt going into a classroom with 5 of these, or 7, or 10, or 4, and just how quickly I'm able to get people involved in playing. It has surpassed my wildest expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, this running drum circles, but people generally don't run drum circles with drum sets because, well, for all of the obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But you can. And so then what you have is, again, this more linguistic approach.
Yeah.
So if I'm laying down a backbeat and I'm telling, kids are copying me instead of me telling them, it's so much faster. That is what I've learned. And I've got all kinds of video footage to prove it. I went into a school in Passaic with Liberty DeVitto, Billy Joel's drummer.
Fantastic drummer. And a great book he just put out, by the way.
Yes, and just a wonderful, wonderful human being,
Agreed.
Long-time friend and supporter of our kids and teachers, and I just, and good personal pal, and also a newer friend, but also equally beautiful human being, an incredible drummer, Jerry Brown, who played with Stevie
Wonder.
Wonder.
Love Jerry, yeah.
Yeah. So we went into a school and literally, with like, I don't know, 5 or 6 kids. And we we had kids coming in who weren't even in the music program, right?
What's
Playing
that?
drums with
Yeah.
these guys. Yeah. And it was just, what it spotlighted for me is something that, I could only, sometimes you don't understand. It's like medicine, certain medicines are like, wait a minute, that also helps the hypertension. Who knew?
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't realize that there were a few other things that keep people from playing drums. The fact that they're so big
Yeah.
can be really intimidating.
And
I never
let's be
thought of it.
honest, expensive.
Well, sure, expensive. That would prevent you from getting one in your life. But even like you're in a room full of 30 people, are you bold enough to sit down on the aptly named throne suitable for royalty and bash on that thing? Because when you hit that, all heads are going to turn and they're going to look at you.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of pressure. Now, if everyone's got one,
Right.
well, then you're just playing alongside of them. So like, again, that's something else that I didn't realize, like just literally the intimidation thing. Like you probably seen this, like you have a kid playing ukulele and they're kind of like leaning over to hear it because, they're a little self-conscious at first, or it's loud and they can't hear it. But what are they, you can't do that with a drum set. Everyone's going to hear you.
Yeah.
But you can with the zip kit. And that's another one of its virtues that you can't really know it until you see it. And then the last thing I'll say, well, two last things about the zip kit. I also didn't realize that I was building a tool that any drummer would likely enjoy, or any musician or music maker would enjoy having. And the way I discovered that is I'm a music maker. So it's like I travel all the time with my zip kit.
Yeah.
Always. And you never know. I walk like walking through an airport, someone's playing on the piano, I whip out the drum set.
Yeah.
I was in Ireland and I chanced on St. Patrick's Day, I chanced upon a busker. This busker was surrounded by like 300 and I don't know, just hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And I set up, I happened to have my zip kit because that's how I roll. And I set it up next to him and I kind of pointed at it and I was like, can I, do you want me to? He's like, yeah, please. So we sat in and it was just like, it was insane. It was so fun and it worked perfectly. It was just perfect. And yes, it's an educational tool, but just like music, I don't think of primarily as an academic subject. I think of it as part of the fabric of human life and human existence. I don't think of the zip kit as a didactic teaching tool. I think of it as a musical instrument, its own musical instrument. And sure, it's not gunning for the full drum set and everyone should be, we'll get a zip kit, whatever, but it gets the job done. And what I like to say is the zip kit brings drumming where drumming dare not go, usually. Like I've got videos of me playing it on a paddle board in a pond, me on ukulele, my friend Craig on the zip kit, and someone else on the same paddle board singing in the middle of a pond. Like you're not doing that with your regular drum set.
One thing that I love about it, if there's any drum teachers out there, private drum teachers like me, if you're like me and you go into people's houses and teach them, and I do this in Hollywood very often, one big problem you'll realize right away is you'll say, okay, I'm going to show you how to play this beat. You sit down, then you get up, then the kid sits down, and then if he doesn't get it, let me show you again. And you keep going back and forth. And of course, you can't bring a whole drum set with you. But I started bringing the prototype with me, and I can just sit there on this little tiny portable kit, and we don't have to move, and we can play together, and it just makes the lesson more efficient and go quickly. And they can mirror image me playing with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And the other thing I've noticed, and, again, like if you have even if students were to come to you,
yeah,
it's, setting up a class for 5 kids might be tough, but not if you've got 5 zip kits in one drum set, and they only take up a couple of square feet. So
and when you collapse them, you can put them on a shelf.
Exactly. And, it's like, what I've learned through this is, and creating it is essentially necessity is the mother of all invention. I mean, now I play drums, and yes, I would call myself a sort of a entry level, kind of drummer, but I'm not drum obsessed. If someone had said to me, 15 years ago, you're going to build your very own musical instrument, soup to nuts, I would have been like, really? I'm going to build a guitar? Because that's what I would have thought. I would never have thought, I'm going to build a drum set? Why would I build a drum set? It would never have occurred to me. But it occurred to me because when I started thinking, oh, well, maybe we could buy them electric drum sets. Oh, gosh, that's such a pain. And they're just as hard to set up or close to it. And you got to plug them in. And they don't take up that much less space. When I ran out of options, it's like, like the saying goes, if you want something done right, sometimes you got to do it yourself. That's what led me to do it,
Wow. And I encourage everybody to go online and look up this video. I love the video you posted of James Hetfield playing one of these. It's just, it's so fun. I remember it popped up my feed. I was like, no way.
Yeah. And to me, like, there's no greater endorsement. Music, right? They call it playing music for a reason. Yeah. If it feels like work, if it feels like a burden, it could be that you're doing it wrong. And that's what I love about, that's so yeah, hearing that just watching the joy that it brings to other people is my greatest satisfaction.
Yeah.
And also when it sells, it benefits Music Will. So that's also another great satisfaction. We'll be donating it to our schools as well, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, everybody wins. I've got a really tough question. And last night I was thinking about this. I went back and forth in my head and I was just like, you know what? This is too important. Maybe not everybody knows this, but the state of education in the United States is becoming very challenging. Anybody that's a teacher knows this. It's already one of the hardest jobs and underpaid jobs there is out there. But in the past several years, teachers are leaving in droves for a lot of reasons. I recently lost my job after teaching 12 years music. What's going on is people, because they're losing funding, they're getting rid of the arts programs. I went to college to study psychology. So I got my degrees in human development and psychology. And for many years, I was what they call a behaviorist. And I worked with special needs kids. So I got hired at the school when I moved to California in 2013. And I was a behaviorist and it was going pretty well. And then the music teacher left. And then my really good friend, Sarah Menays, another teacher there, she said to the principal, hey, Malcolm's a really good musician. I know he plays drums. He, does this and that. He should be our music teacher. So I accepted the idea. And because I hadn't studied, theory since high school, I went and I did a whole bunch of ORF classes like you were talking about. So I kind of sharpened the pencil and got ready to do it. Well, hey, I never planned on being a teacher. I never planned on being a music teacher, but I turned out to be really good at it. And I built up a community in our school. But what happened along the lines, if you don't know about the educational system in California, we've got public schools, charter schools, and private schools. The whole idea of charter schools is to bring people like me, artistic people from the community, into the schools and teach the arts in unorthodox ways. And that is one of the many things that's alluring to parents. And unfortunately, this affected public schools in a bad way because a lot of families said, well, oh man, we love this arts program. Let's go to a charter school. So this whole division between public schools and charter schools started to build up to the point that they finally passed a law within the last 5 years that if you don't have your teaching credentials in the subject that you're teaching, you're no longer allowed to teach. So I couldn't get my credentials. I'm 55. I don't have an extra 20 grand. I'm paying off loans for my 2 older sons. And I also don't have time to drive to Northridge 5 nights a week. And the people that run all this wouldn't let me do it online. So I had to give up. I had to step down. And then on top of that, what the schools started to do is they cut all the arts teachers down to part-time without health insurance. So tons of arts teachers are leaving because we can't make a living. It is my theory, although this is very sad that this is happening and the new administration is making it even more difficult. I personally have a theory that the arts are going to become privatized. So what I've had to do is now I'm teaching privately and I'm doing all the things I do, but I'm going into people's homes and offering services, not only from my studio, but going out there and helping the community. So I think what you do, David, is immensely important, especially now. But I would love you to reflect on what I'm saying and what you're seeing, and what do you see the future of music, and how will what Music Will does have to change to accommodate all these teachers that are leaving and can't afford to be teachers anymore?
Well, I'll just start with the saying, that if you think education is expensive, try paying the cost of ignorance.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, things can be cyclical, and sometimes there's good to that, but there's also real bad. We're at a time where I think education is being really, really undervalued writ large. Music education certainly, and maybe more than even than education in general. But to me, the underlying problem is that education is looked at in the United States by enough people, not all people. Americans aren't unified about anything, and nor is anybody else. When you get 330 some odd million people in a room, no, they're not. They will not be single-minded, and no amount of forcing can make them be so. Right. But there are enough people that feel like, oh, teaching, anybody can do it, or that's just glorified babysitting, right. Or that's not. You just get 3 months. I mean, it's just like a real lack of understanding and respect for the profession.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the real issue. And so the future of Music Will, and the future of anything that I want to be involved with that relates directly to schools, advocacy for teachers, for agency, for respect, for pay, has to be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And then put on top of all of that we live in a world where everything's rapidly changing because of AI. Yes. And people who say, oh, well, that's just the newest thing. Things have always changed rapidly. I think, that's a real grave misreading of the situation. Like, this is going to be, we've lived through incredible disruptions, like the advent of the internet and big box stores and the closing of mom and pop stores. And, it's like, so sure, it sounds like it's just another thing on the way.
Yeah.
But the teaching, like so many other incredibly valuable professions like law and medicine and et cetera, is going to be rocked by this new technology.
Yeah.
In fact, it already is. So, okay, so when a student can get the answer to any musical question they have from an algorithm, when they can say, hey, can you tell me if I'm playing the right note? When they can say, hey, I want to write a song, can you play the drums and the bass? When all of that can be done, what is the role of the music teacher?
Right.
When the AI can explore the casework, the law on a particular issue, and can review in nanoseconds the 17 million lawsuits and come up with an approach for taking or defending a case, what's the role of the lawyer? And the truth of the matter is, I don't have any answers on that. I wish that I did.
Yeah.
And nor do we as a society. But I do have some insight into worrying about what bathroom people use, worrying about what religion people play to, worrying about what color people's skins are. All of that is just distraction and smokescreen, and keeps us from discussing the real issues of our time, which are going to move forward and progress with or without us. So I wish I could give a more satisfying answer.
Yeah.
But it's that's the truthful answer. And so, in my own role, that's one of the things that I consider myself, a student of it myself, and I'm trying to figure out, in a world where so many professions, maybe even the majority of them, are going to be rendered obsolete, possibly in the space of a handful of years, even if it was 10 years. Yeah. What's the role, what's the role for the arts and et cetera? And also, what's the role, just for people? And at the end of the day, I think it comes to, I'll close by just saying, I still value people over machines. I still value people over profit. I still value the experience of being a human in fellowship with other humans. And, I'm committed to the extent that I'm able to helping us find the solutions that ensures the continuance of our species and of our ecosystems
Yeah.
and et cetera. And I see a lot of, not a lot, but there's certainly a trend right now where the oligarchs and the people in power and the people with the levers of industry and are promising all kinds of fantastic futures and utopia, et
Yeah.
cetera. And yeah, that's one possible outcome. But I'm not seeing evidence right now that that's the primary motive of these companies and these individuals. And so, I think there's power in numbers, and I hope that the great numbers of humans in this country and elsewhere remember that we need each other, and we're much more connected to one another than any algorithm could try to dissuade us from believing. So I'll leave it there.
Well, and let me just say the flip side to my experience. When I left the school and stepped down, I said to them, hey, I just want you to think about something. Let's say that you're a 22-year-old young man or young woman. You've just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars going to school to learn to be an art teacher, a garden teacher, a music teacher. You're coming out of college with debts. Why in the world would you accept a job that is part-time with no health insurance when you have to pay out those loans? And you're going to have to be like me. You're going to have to put 2 other jobs on top of your job. You're just going to get burnt out, and eventually you're going to give up. So this is something that's imperative that we solve. And I think that you weren't exaggerating at all. I think on a world level, we really have to figure out what we're going to do. On one hand, when people tell me about AI, I can also see the good things about AI. I'm also old enough to remember as a drummer in the 80s when drum machines were invented. It put a lot of us out of work for a while. But I think one of the smartest guys was Omar Hakim, great drummer. And he was one of the first guys, he went out and bought a drum machine. And he goes, you know what? Now you can hire me. If you want me to program the drums, I'll do that. If you want me to play the drums, I'll do that. So that was a smart approach. And we've got to figure out a way to combine the reality of today's technology with the human element.
Well, these are all choices. And, we as a society chose to limit who could have nuclear materials because we recognized very early on the incredible danger of just letting this technology proliferate. And, right now there's an arms race, for artificial intelligence that's not dissimilar. And the hue and cry of all of the people that are producing these things, well, if we don't develop it, somebody else will.
Right.
And ergo, you need some sort of international cooperation. And unfortunately, right now, international cooperation is not at an all-time high. So, but again, for your listeners that are into this kind of stuff, one of the guys that I like to listen to a lot is a gentleman by the name of Yuval Harari. And he talks quite a lot about very common sense approaches to dealing with, artificial intelligence, but that's its own podcast. I would Yuval Harari, definitely Google him, and he's out there. He's one of the preeminent thinkers in the space.
Well, let's end by doing a couple positive things. So it sounds like you have just gone through a major change too with what you're going to do with the rest of your life, because now they call you a founder and chief vision officer. So what are the next few things you'd like to do with your life?
Yeah, sure. Well, come November, hopefully the Zip Kit will have launched in schools around the United States and elsewhere. And I will be stepping off of the staff at Music Will and onto the advisory board. And like I said earlier in the interview, if you're lucky, you get to be old. And if you're luckier still, you learn a few things along the way. And what I've learned is that I've been able to build concentric sort of circles of impact by always keeping my eyes on the horizon, by always sort of it doesn't come in an epiphany. It comes in little waves. And it, after 23 years of running, after founding Music Will, it occurred to me I see myself more as an ecosystem entrepreneur as opposed to a, founder. Yes, I founded Music Will, then Little Kids Rock, but then I also created a new category of music education called modern band.
Yeah.
And I convinced the US public school system in your state, for example, the State Department of Education, to adopt modern band as its own, as it's a whole new thing. So that's not, how should I put it? It's not right down the fairway like we do. We give kids instruments. We're like, well, wait, we're redefining how schools define their own music programs, and I've also embedded it in over 100 colleges and universities. So, what I've learned over the last 23 years is how to work with government, how to work with teachers, how to work with arts administrators, how to work with policymakers, how to work with industry, musical products industry, music content industry. And so whatever's next for me is going to feel like that next ring. And I've got like 7 or 8 different patents, including some for the Zip Kit, but I've got some others. So I'm taking a beat. And probably at the beginning of the fall here, or sometime shortly after that, I'll reveal my next concoction or set of concoctions. But it's definitely going to be leveraging, hopefully, my ability to forge partnerships and collaborations across different sectors, all in the service of creating and disseminating instruments of mass instruction. Whether they be something like Music Will or Musical Wonders or the Zip Kit or the Quincy Jones Music Consortium, which I was a part of, or Take Note Colorado. I mean, I've been involved with many sort of these things, and I feel that, the more you practice, the better you get. So I feel like while I'm still young enough, I feel I've got at least another 10 or 15 years of fight in me. I want to take what I'm doing to the next level, and I've got some ideas, and that'll be probably another podcast sometime.
We'll have to reconvene so we can find out what happens.
Well, I'll tease it just a teeny bit, and I'll tell you that today, this very day, I trademarked the term instruments of mass instruction.
Ooh. I always end with a couple quotes that I like to hear people respond to. So first one is by one of my favorite singers from Iceland. Her name is Björk, or as they say there, Björk. She once said, as a kid, I felt it was really weird that music schools behaved like a conveyor belt to make performers for those symphony orchestras. If you were really good and practice your violin for a few hours a day, for 10 years, you might be invited to this VIP elite club. For me, music was not about that. It's about freedom and expression and individuality and impulsiveness and spontaneity. Now, another one of my favorite singers, Kate Bush, said something similar. She said, if you believe in what you do and what you really want to be in music, just stick at it. It's always a learning process. Enjoy it, because I think making music is a privilege, really. In an ideal world, it should always be fun. As much as possible, make it fun. What do you think about what both of those women had to say?
I agree 100%. I would, as my rejoinder, I would offer a quote from Tom Petty.
Ooh, okay.
Who said, music is probably the only real magic I've encountered in my life.
I love that.
There's not some trick involved with it. It's pure and it's real. It moves, it heals, it communicates, and does all these incredible things. And look, we all know ultimately it didn't save Tom, but who knows? That man may have been dead decades and decades ago. We can't know, but we do, and then again, another great quote is from Bob Marley, who says, one thing about music, when it hits you, you feel no pain.
I love that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, Tom Petty's music has moved and inspired so many people for so many years. And so, yeah, I agree with both Kate Bush and Björk. And I throw my hat in with the likes of Tom Petty and Bob Marley. I feel I'm in good company. And I'll give you my final quote, which is, and I think it's a good one to close with, because I think this is what teaching is all about, whether you're a music teacher, or an art teacher, or a history teacher. And it was Pablo Casals,
Ooh.
The famed Spanish cellist who was in exile from fascism in Spain and suffered quite directly for refusing to be complicit in the totalitarian movements of his day. And he said, "You must work. We all must work to make the world worthy of its children." And if more people would do that, this is a simple recipe. Is what we're doing going to make the world worthy of these luminous little beings? Because if it's not, get busy.
Yeah.
It has been a real pleasure, as always, talking with you, Malcolm.
Yes.
And you're a wonderful person. And
You as well.
My life is definitely richer for knowing you. And I loved hearing your stories.
Thank you. And I loved hearing yours. And I just want to help you before we go. How can people get a zip kit?
So the best way to get a zip kit is to go to musicwill.org/zip kit. And there you can sign up to be alerted when they finally arrive, which will hopefully be sometime in August or September.
Okay. And do we know the price tag yet?
They will be retailing for $2.99.
Wow. That's a good deal.
And then for Music World teachers, there's going to be a proprietary deep discount.
And they do come with the seat, the throne, right?
They come with a kick, the snare, the hi-hat, the throne, a drum pad built into the lid, a tuning key. So yeah, it's the complete set. If you want more, you can also get toms and cymbals, but those are extra. So again, it's sort of the nature of the product. First and foremost, you can be used to teach, and it's the minimum of what you need. So yeah, it's got throne, sticks, everything.
Wow. And then just so people can follow what you're up to, obviously they can go to musicwill.org, but what social media are you on? I think I know you're on Facebook, but are you also on Instagram?
I'm on Facebook, and my daughter has convinced me that, yes, I need to get off my duff and get onto Instagram too, and LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. So I'm going to be being more vocal, especially because my role is going to be coaching and counseling and cheerleading perhaps more than in the past. So if you look for me, Dave Wish, I won't be too hard to find.
And promise me next time you're in Los Angeles, let's get together for some espresso.
You got it. And the next time you're in New York City or anywhere nearby, you got to look me up too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David Wish. This has been immensely pleasurable.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Malcolm.